Hey everyone, welcome back to this explainer. Today, we're diving deep into a pretty wild question. Why does an ancient epic about a lost sailor still dictate so much of our modern culture? We're going to trace a straight line from ancient Greek pottery to modern Hollywood blockbusters, and actually, even up to the literal surface of the moon.
I mean, think about it. How on earth does a Greek myth written in the 8th century BCE connect Christopher Nolan's upcoming 2026 film adaptation with the very first private spacecraft to soft land on the lunar surface? We've been telling and retelling the story of Odysseus for literally 3 millennia. What is it about this specific survivor that keeps us coming back for more?
So, here is our navigational chart for today. First up, a journey without end. Then, the monsters, magic, and myth of the plot, followed by an analysis of our deeply flawed epic hero. Finally, we'll unpack the core themes and trace a 3 millennia visual legacy. Let's set sail. Section 1. A Journey Without End. Modern Space Exploration. Let's see exactly how Homer's epic bridges the gap between ancient storytelling and cutting-edge spaceflight. Get this, in February 2024, Intuitive Machines launched the IM-1 lunar lander. And what did they name it? Odysseus. It actually became the very first commercial mission to successfully soft land on the moon, touching down at the Malaparte A crater. But it wasn't just carrying standard NASA tech like LiDAR and stereo cameras. It carried an incredible cross-section of humanity. We're talking contemporary art by Jeff Koons featuring 125 miniature moon sculptures, and the Arch Mission Foundation's Lunar Library, which is essentially a backup of the English Wikipedia. We literally sent our collective internet history and art to the stars, and we chose to name the vessel after a mythological Greek sailor? That's huge. Moving on to Section 2, Monsters, Magic, and Myth, a grueling saga. Let's unpack what this namesake sailor actually endured. The sheer scale of this guy's journey is just staggering. We kind of tend to picture the Odyssey as a quick, action-packed adventure, right? But this whole thing spans 20 long years away from his home of Ithaca. That is 10 years of brutal combat fighting the Trojan War, famously using his tactical genius to invent the Trojan horse, of course, followed by another agonizing decade just trying to get home. That includes a whole year derailed by the temptation and aid of the sorceress Circe, and a massive 8 years held captive by the sea nymph Calypso. And all the while, his faithful wife Penelope and his son Telemachus are back home waiting, desperately fending off greedy suitors until his ultimate violent day of return. And within that agonizing timeline, he survives an absolute gauntlet of mythological terrors. But here's the thing, his survival depends almost entirely on his mind, not just his muscles. He gets trapped by the Cyclops Polyphemus, blinds the giant, and brilliantly claims his name is Nobody to avoid raising an alarm, eventually escaping by hiding under the bellies of sheep. Then, he literally journeys to the western edge of the world, down into the underworld itself, just to summon the spirit of the prophet Tiresias for advice. Finally, he relies on sheer willpower, strapping himself to his ship's mast to navigate past the deadly song of the sirens and survive the horrifying sea monsters Scylla and Charybdis.
Section 3. The Flawed Epic Hero, an Oppenheimer-esque man. Who exactly is the man surviving all of this? Because he isn't the flawless superhero you might expect.
So he completely subverts the ideal epic hero. Sure, he has unmatched strength, brilliant tactical genius, and an unwavering desire to return to his homeland. But he's also a deeply, deeply flawed human being. He's arrogant, he's unfaithful, he angers the gods, specifically Poseidon, through sheer pride, which causes the tumultuous weather that delays his journey. And ultimately he makes choices and allows his men to make choices that get his entire crew killed. By the time he actually reaches Ithaca, he is the sole survivor. He's this Oppenheimer-esque survivor of total war, wrestling with the trauma of what he's done. In fact, modern academic analysis points out that Odysseus flat-out refuses to be a one-dimensional stereotype. He evaluates situations logically, sure, but for the purpose of manipulation, he's more than willing to use stealing and cheating just as much as courage to survive. He is a total mesh of contradictions. He's favored by the goddess Athena for his astuteness, but he is constantly causing his own problems through his own pride. And this inclusion of deep human flaws actually transformed ancient storytelling. It highlights a massive shift in Greek society and cultural expression at the time. Greek audiences didn't just want an untouchable, perfect god. Actually, much like our love for modern anti-heroes today, they wanted a self-made man who grows in wisdom, judgment, and world weariness through his own devastating mistakes. This crucial point is perfectly captured in Book 22.
When he finally returns to Ithaca and defeats Penelope's suitors in this brutally violent battle, he actually stops his old nurse from cheering. He says, "It is not piety to glory so over slain men. These were destroyed by the doom of the gods and their own hard actions." Even in his most triumphant, violent moment, he pauses to recognize the tragedy of death. This really proves just how complex and weary he has become.
Section 4. Core themes of the Odyssey, the human experience. Let's shift from the character of the man to the core message of the text, and what Homer is actually trying to tell us here.
This epic survives because it's not just a monster story. It's a timeless allegory. It captures the universal aching longing and desire to return home. It's a masterclass in perseverance and resilience through 20 years of trials. It details the exhausting struggle against temptation, whether that's fighting off the numbing comforts of the Lotus Eaters or escaping the magical grasp of Circe and the Sirens. It's a poignant look at the search for identity after surviving the trauma of total war. And anchoring all of this absolute chaos is unwavering loyalty, perfectly symbolized by Penelope, who endlessly weaves and unpicks a funeral shroud every single day just to delay her suitors and protect her family.
Now, looking at the literary tools driving these themes, we really have to talk about hubris. Hubris is excessive pride or dangerous overconfidence, and it often leads to a tragic downfall or severe punishment from the gods. In Greek literature, it's the ultimate tragic flaw, and it is the absolute engine of the Odyssey's plot. When Odysseus escapes the Cyclops, he can't just sail away quietly. Nope, his hubris makes him shout his real name back at the giant just to claim the glory. That single act of pride brings down Poseidon's wrath and practically guarantees he's going to suffer for another 10 years.
Which brings us to Section 5, a 3-millennia legacy, artistic inspiration. Let's trace how these incredible themes and this deeply flawed protagonist have inspired visual artists for 3,000 years.
Way back in 650 BCE, everyday Greek pottery, like the Eleusis-necked amphora, featured Odysseus blinding the Cyclops, proving this was everyday pop culture, not just high literature reserved for the elite. Jump to the 2nd century CE, and the Romans were building entire room-sized mosaics of him resisting the Sirens. By 1891, Victorian artists like John William Waterhouse were painting incredibly psychological, romantic portraits of Circe and Penelope. And soon, in 2026, Christopher Nolan is going to bring this all into modern cinema. Every single era finds a way to reinvent his struggles to match their own cultural anxieties.
There's a saying that every generation creates its own Odysseus. The epic remains incredibly adaptable because its central concerns, fear, loyalty, temptation, and trauma, are completely timeless. Every artist, and really every age, embarks on this journey anew.
Because ultimately, the Odyssey isn't just a story about a journey home. It is a powerful warning, and it leaves a question for all of us. If you were stripped of everything on a 20-year journey, facing monsters, gods, and your own tragic flaws, who would you become? When the journey takes absolutely everything from you, what is left? Thank you so much for joining me today. Keep asking these big questions, and I'll see you in the next explainer.